Bonjour à tous, bienvenue à cette conférence organisée par la Fondation Art Explora. Je vais commencer par me présenter avant de présenter mes invités aujourd'hui. Je m'appelle Émilie, je suis directrice des publics pour la Fondation Art Explora et nous sommes très heureuses, parce que c'est une scène 100% féminine aujourd'hui, de venir vous parler de projets culturels mobiles et de comment on peut favoriser la rencontre avec les publics grâce à des projets culturels mobiles, et notamment grâce à ces deux projets que vont nous présenter dans un instant Mike et Rike. Alors peut-être quelques mots au sujet de la Fondation Art Explora, si vous ne la connaissez pas encore. C'est une fondation qui est reconnue d'utilité publique depuis 2 ans maintenant, qui existe depuis 5 ans et qui a pour vocation de renouveler le dialogue entre les arts, la culture et les publics. Donc vraiment en plaçant les publics au cœur de sa réflexion et au cœur des actions qu'elle met en place. Et on a donc pour cela plusieurs stratégies. Je vais vous parler notamment du prix Art Explora, que l'on met en place chaque année, parce que c'est comme ça qu'on s'est rencontrés et qu'on a rencontré les deux projets portés par Rike et Kate. Ce prix est un prix qui est ouvert et accessible à toutes les organisations culturelles européennes, mais aussi à des organisations culturelles en provenance de la zone des Balkans et de l'Ukraine. C'est un prix qui est destiné à récompenser les actions innovantes pour favoriser l'accès à la culture, l'engagement et la participation des publics. C'est un prix qui est important pour la Fondation, puisqu'il existe depuis la création de la Fondation, donc il y a 5 ans. C'est vraiment un des tout premiers projets qui a été inventé et qui est porté par la Fondation. Et donc ce prix nous permet en fait d'avoir des candidatures qui nous permettent de visibiliser et de rendre et de promouvoir toutes les actions innovantes en direction des publics portées par nos collègues européens dans toute l'Europe et qui travaillent particulièrement à ces sujets de participation culturelle, de participation des publics pour des actions culturelles. C'est comme ça que nous avons rencontré donc ces deux projets dont je vais parler aujourd'hui. Je vais commencer par présenter Kate, qui nous vient du Royaume-Uni, qui est la directrice de projet de Artichoke. Et c'est un projet en fait que l'on connaît parce qu'il avait été présélectionné pour le prix en 2023. Il nous a particulièrement séduit et c'est pour ça qu'on l'a recontactée pour qu'elle vienne nous présenter aujourd'hui. Alors peut-être, Kate, je vais tout simplement, pour commencer, te demander de nous présenter le projet, sa spécificité mobile, puisque c'est un projet qui a un ADN de mobilité, et l'originalité peut-être, même si je vais te laisser le décrire, c'est que c'est un projet mobile, mais en Europe, pas seulement au Royaume-Uni.
So Artichoke, the organization I work for, exists to place work in the heart of the public realm. So we want to literally take work that would normally exist behind the walls of galleries and museums and place them at the heart of the cities and places in which people live. We do this in many different ways. We work with composers, we work with artists, visual artists, we work with performance artists, and we enable them to position their work directly in front of people in the places that they live and work. So our first piece was producing the work of the French company Royal de Luxe in London in 2007. And at that stage, London was closed for sporting events, it was closed for large royal events, but never closed for the work of an artist. So this began a process over the last 20 years where we have worked in many, many different locations and places across mainly the UK to invade those public spaces with the vast imaginations of the artists that we work with. So in some cases that is rural settings, in some cases that is cities. In the piece that we have been discussing with Art Explora, Tree Line is a piece of work which seeks to create a new model of touring based on the most ancient natural environment that we have across Europe. So before countries, before borders, before there were restrictions of people's movement, trees existed. And those trees formed a vast beech forest, so a vast forest that encompasses about 18 different locations across Europe, right from the east and ending in the UK. For this project, we are forming a new network of partners where we're going to work with the composer Graham Fitkin. So Graham is a contemporary minimalist composer, to encourage communities in those places to select trees that are important to them from these ancient forests. And Graham is going to sample and take sound recordings from the trees and to weave them into a unique composition, musical composition. He's going to then undertake the quest to perform the composition in all of the places along the route that the trees have been sampled from. And the route starts in Romania, passes through 9 countries, and will take around 2 months to complete. And he's going to be cycling on his bicycle between the different locations that the concert is presented. So for us, it's really taking a very, very ancient basis of European culture, the beech forests, and making them the center of a very contemporary way of engaging communities along the route. So for 3,000 kilometers, he's going to be cycling and performing, and we will be meeting those communities along the route and creating as a legacy a large network of partners that have encountered the project.
Alors, ce qui est vraiment intéressant dans ce projet, c'est qu'effectivement, donc c'est un projet qui va à la rencontre des publics et de ces différentes communautés. Est-ce que tu pourrais peut-être un peu préciser de quelle manière, quelles sont toutes les manières en fait d'engager ces publics tout au long de la route, et qu'est-ce qui rend ce projet intéressant en ce sens, et comment est-ce qu'il pourrait être réplicable finalement encore plus que ce qu'il ne l'est, parce que c'est déjà un projet très ambitieux en termes géographiques.
Oui. J'essaye. The idea became as a simple idea to record the sounds of trees and to make those into a composition that Graham would then perform along the route. As we've been working with the idea over the last year, we are creating various different levels and opportunities to engage people, both in the creation of the music, in the experience of the trees, and then in the way that the music will be received. So stage 1 is we're finding partners who are interested in joining us on this journey. And those might be musical organizations, they might be city administrations, they might be environmental organizations, but people who are interested in hosting a contemporary classical concert. We're providing a special pack and recording equipment for the communities to go and record the sounds of their trees. Graham is then going to go away and weave that into a composition. At the same time, he's engaging with musicians local to the trees. So all of the sites where he's going to be performing, he's also meeting musicians along the route and will be performing alongside them in the final concerts. We also recognize that there will be lots of people who are interested in the cycling aspect. So for those people who are cycling fans, they will have the opportunity to see and maybe to cycle some of the route with Graham along the way. And then I guess as the project progresses, we're going to invite people to send in photos of trees that mean something to them. So we're going to be creating a contemporary portrait of trees as well along the route that he's taking in.
Great. So maybe it's time to pass the word to Rike. Je vais repasser en français. Rike, le projet que tu as inventé et que tu portes a été présélectionné pour le prix Art Explora en 2024. Et donc tu es la directrice de l'Opéra Festival de Copenhague. Et tu portes, vous avez inventé un projet qui s'appelle Ring, Sing, Repeat. Il y a évidemment des échos avec le projet que vient de présenter Kate, puisque vous partez vous aussi à la rencontre de communautés, d'habitants. Est-ce que tu peux nous expliquer peut-être comment est né le festival et dans quel objectif et comment est-ce que vous allez à la rencontre de ces publics en apportant l'opéra jusqu'à eux?
Thank you. Yes. If I understood the question right, you also a little bit about the festival, right? Yeah. So the Copenhagen Opera Festival was founded in 2009. I've been with the festival since 2017. And the festival exists to kind of renew the opera genres. We exist outside of the opera houses. It's like an entity on its own. We have nothing to do with the Royal Opera House, even though we kind of collaborate sometimes. We exist 10 days each year in August. We have like 30 different formats each year. We perform more than 100 individual events for 20,000 plus audiences. And we kind of we do that with, we present new works, newly written operas. This year I think we have a premiere of 6 new operas. We have a new take on classical works. We do that with pop-up mobile formats, and we have a huge outdoor stage in the most densely populated area of Copenhagen, where we perform over 4 days, something like 10, 12 performances for free. And what the overall aim of the festival is kind of to engage newcomers to opera and challenge the opera lovers. And the main way we do that is try to make everyone feel welcome. And just a little bit about my background, because I have background in architecture and communication, but I've been heading an electronic music festival in Copenhagen for many years. I've been heading a hosting of a world music expo and fair festival. So I worked across genres. I was new to opera when I started at the festival. I work across venues, places, but always with the focus of the audiences. So why are we doing this, and who are we doing this for? And just a small parenthesis, I have a personal interest in the cities as a public space, as a shared space, and it's with the question of who owns the city and who gets to decide what we do in the city, where and with whom. So it's also quite fascinating to walk around Paris and see what's happening in this city over the last 20 years. It seems like you managed to actually lower the traffic with 50%, if I understood correctly. And it's actually obvious to see that there are new places, there are parks and areas of the street that is now more accessible for you who live here, and that's very inspiring. So one of the things we do at the festival and this project that's called Write, Sing, Repeat is the story is that these 4 characters escaped the classical operas. So it's Musetta and Mimi and different characters you might know from the classical pieces, and they are tired of being killed or having to kill and continue all the time. So they kind of escaped, and they hijack this open truck and roam around Copenhagen. And they do that with opera bangers, just blasting out of speakers from the car. And it's a phenomenon known in Denmark for when students end the school years. So they drive around in these trucks, blasting all kinds of music out and making a lot of noise. So we kind of took that format, you can say, and replaced it with opera. And so they stop in playgrounds, streets, different places, and perform and engage with the audiences there. And it's a very intimate, small 10, 15 minutes performances. And what we then added, I'll try to wrap it up now, is the opportunity for audiences to apply for this opera moment. Not apply for themselves, but apply to give it away. So in 100 words, they should be able to describe, why do I want to give this opera, this art opportunity to someone else? It might be the school of their children, an elder home. It might be the tech conference where they have, they want to present people for something different. And then we have a jury who kind of figures out who should get it and try to spread it as fast as possible.
Thank you. Ce qui est intéressant, c'est que, alors, tu mentionnes que tu as travaillé pour un festival de musique électronique qui est peut-être, je pose la question, plus accessible que l'opéra. En quoi est-ce que inventer un projet mobile autour de la musique d'opéra était particulièrement important pour vous, pour justement peut-être plus ouvrir ce secteur, cette musique qui peut paraître à certains publics moins accessible que d'autres? Et pourquoi avoir choisi un dispositif mobile qui vous permet de vous déplacer pour apporter la musique jusqu'à ces publics?
Yes, so in a way, I work with the same methods I did when I did the Electronic Music Festival, because that was in a time where electronic music was considered a little bit dangerous and something that happened in nightclubs, and you were to take certain drugs or things to be kind of included in that. And so we took the music out of the nightclubs. We performed it in parks and in cinemas or different places. So the basic thing is to take the music out and present it in places where people already feel welcome, or where they know this theater, they know this park, they know this neighborhood, and this is also my place. And when you present things in a place where audiences feel this is also my place, they might be more curious and more open to you coming by. And so why we thought with the opera it was important to make this mobile project is, if you didn't grow up with opera, it takes a long time to seek it out and to go and buy the tickets. And often it's in houses where you have an idea, it's really expensive. That's not an idea, it's true. Maybe you think you have to wear certain clothes, or you don't know exactly when can I clap and what is the rules here. So by taking a genre that is for a lot of people difficult to access, and just going out there and present it, makes it just music. And then you might like it, you might not like it, but it's easier for you to take it in.
Peut-être quelques mots avant de reposer des questions à Kate sur cette question des freins qui peuvent exister à avoir accès à la musique classique ou à la musique d'opéra. Vous avez aussi un vélo cargo, Rike, qui permet d'aller encore plus loin, j'allais dire, dans le fait d'aller vers les publics, puisque ça permet de circuler dans des centres-villes en dehors de Copenhague. Donc vous avez aussi cette volonté de vous adresser particulièrement à des villes plus petites, qui ont peut-être une proposition culturelle moins dense que dans les grandes villes ou les capitales.
Yes, that's of course another part of it, that we try to make this, even though our name is Copenhagen Opera Festival, we try to make it as national as possible. And we've had this Ride, Sing, Repeat a lot of places in the country. Sometimes the truck is too big and they've been driving around in a small golf wagon or whatever is possible in these local areas. And it's true, it came out of a project on a bicycle. So maybe we should team up. And it's just the way of being able to access into all the areas of a city, and even in a smaller city. And it is true, sometimes it's in a way more rewarding to work in smaller places that hasn't the same kind of offers as a big city. I mean, in Copenhagen you can get all kind of art for free all the time if you seek it out. So it's very interesting to go across and the encounters with the audiences.
Mm-hmm. Donc là, évidemment, il y a des points communs avec le projet que tu portes, Kate, et que tu accompagnes. Peut-être d'où est venue l'idée d'aller justement dans des endroits où on pouvait imaginer la musique différemment, donc au sein de ces forêts ancestrales européennes, pour recréer un lien différent et surtout aller dans un endroit où on n'a pas l'habitude de pouvoir contribuer en plus à une œuvre de musique classique.
So I think the inspiration for Graham Fitkin, who's the composer who brought the idea to us, was that there are so many borders and frontiers that govern our lives and that kind of control maybe how we think or where we feel comfortable or where we go. And he wanted to use music to create a world where those borders didn't exist and to find ways that we could make connections between different places through the trees that inhabit those places without any consideration for borders or for a kind of rules or regulations. So the tree becomes at one stage a look back to the past, but also our hope for the future, because without trees, we're nothing. And so what can we learn from the way that the trees communicate, and how can music make that connection between people who live maybe in a way that's quite isolated from each other? So by following a route of a forest, it's quite challenging if you're creating a tour, because you're having to go from place to place in a way that is very linear. The project is called Tree Line, and we're literally creating a line. But by following that pattern, you are naturally visiting places which have maybe great cultural infrastructure and other places where there is nothing, and you're treating those locations the same. So there is not a sense of one place having a lesser or a greater consideration because of its history or its cultural heritage. We're able to create a route that unifies places of all sizes and scales and experience.
Et ça, c'est quelque chose que vous avez en commun toutes les deux, que vos projets ont en commun, c'est que alors les projets mobiles existent depuis longtemps, mais vos deux projets sont innovants dans le sens où ils réinventent les rapports au public d'une part, et où d'autre part vous allez performer dans des endroits inattendus. Donc c'est pas seulement du hors les murs au sens classique du terme, c'est en plus le fait d'aller dans un endroit inattendu. Est-ce que ce que vous avez inventé, donc je vous laisse répondre chacune à votre tour ou toutes les deux, est-ce que ces actions-là, vous auriez pu les inventer soit en partenariat avec un lieu existant, donc entre quatre murs, ou est-ce que finalement la liberté de mouvement et la liberté de choisir l'endroit où vous pouviez projeter le projet était importante? Quelle liberté apporte le fait d'être mobile à vos projets?
It's interesting on a personal level. So my first few jobs were working in a theatre building, and my role in a form of education or participation role was to get people over the threshold and into the building. And so there was a lot of work to make those kind of rules that you talk about in terms of opera and you know, going into a building that maybe you feel alienated by, to make those things feel more comfortable. And when I came across the work, actually across a lot of work in France and in Spain of companies who were working outside buildings, I thought, wow, this is great. You don't have to be getting people over the threshold of a building. And there is an incredible freedom from that, but there is also there is also the question, as you say, as to you're having to make your stage, you're having to make your place of performance or exhibition fresh each time. So none of the rules that permit you to do what you do in a theatre building, that it's licensed for this kind of activity, or the expectations, they don't exist. So you're having to invent that fresh each time that you create a new piece of work. And that is both a freedom, but is also a big part of the work, because the streets that are open to markets, to traffic, to businesses, to demonstrations have to then be kind of adapted, is perhaps too strong, but they have to be reinvented for artistic expression. And so there's another layer of work that goes to make that as seamless and seeming as if it's as free as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. It is very specific from each project. I mean, this mobile project we present here is created to be able to pop up almost everywhere. Sometimes you have to change the vehicle. But we have other outdoor projects that are very dependent on, well, the weather is another thing, and also audiences who are used to have, you know, the lights or the comfortable seating, or all these things that you can have in a house that you don't have outside. So you have to be quite clever in your designing to actually make it feel as free.
Qu'est-ce qui... vous avez des retours des publics, je pense particulièrement forts, puisque ces retours vous sont faits pendant et j'imagine après les performances. Quel nouveau lien est-ce que vous réussissez à créer avec vos publics? Qu'est-ce que ça transforme? Est-ce que ça transforme vos audiences? Est-ce que c'est une expérience transformative? Et qu'est-ce que vous pouvez constater peut-être pour les publics par rapport à vos expériences antérieures qui ont pu peut-être, qui peuvent avoir lieu entre quatre murs, mais qu'est-ce que ça crée en fait comme lien avec les publics?
It creates, there's several bonds actually. It creates one for us as an organization, because we get to get some feedback from the audiences and understand better why is this interesting or not interesting for them. But we also realize it creates bonds between the audiences, which is actually one of my personal wins, or whatever you call it, because normally if you go into a house, when you sit in your seats and the light goes down, it's you and what's going on the stage. But here we are performing outside in daylight, and the audiences can see each other. So if you're laughing and she's laughing, and suddenly you get eye contact, and there's this just tiny temporarily bond that's like, we're here together. And I think, it's get a little political almost now, but in the world as it is at the moment, it's very, very important that we have these tiny encounters with other people. As, oh, you're my neighbor, or you're just some stranger. And if you do this in a local area, and I do realize this is the woman living on the 3rd floor, and we have experienced something together. Next time we meet, we have just a tiny thing in common, and that's enough to start the next conversation.
I think that's so important, is that spark and the potential of something different. And I think for us at Artichoke, there's all of that. And there's also the temporary transformation of a place. So if you're placing a performance or an art installation or a lighting installation or a piece of music into a corner of a town, city, village, landscape that people may be really familiar with in everyday life, that may be the way they go to work, it may be the way that they pick up their children from school, you're creating new memories of that place. And so forever, that corner where that performance has taken place or that installation has been envisaged, the public who've experienced it keep that memory. And so their city builds off these magical moments of the memories of the temporary, ephemeral work that might only be there for 2 or 3 days, or even 10 minutes.
Et ce qui est intéressant aussi, c'est de se demander, même si ce que vous proposez, ce sont des événements, des moments de surprise, d'engagement des publics, d'interaction avec les publics qui sont des instantanés, qu'est-ce que ça crée chez eux après? Comment vous gardez le lien? Est-ce que c'est des gens, peut-être plutôt dans le cas de Rike, que vous voyez revenir à d'autres manifestations que vous organisez, peut-être dans d'autres cadres, d'autres projets?
Yes, I mean, we are primarily a festival 10 days in August, and we do engage in a few things throughout the years and send some of our formats around. But I think in the beginning when we made the festival, we had an idea that we were creating new audiences for the opera houses. I'm not totally convinced anymore that's true, to be honest. I think we create some. But a lot of people come back for this format, and because they like this way of engaging with art.
Est-ce que vous aimeriez, par exemple, travailler avec l'opéra de Copenhague, ou est-ce que finalement c'est une autre manière d'aborder l'opéra, et peut-être que ce sont des publics qui peuvent se rejoindre d'une manière ou d'une autre, mais pas forcément dans un cadre conjoint?
I don't think I like this. I think it's very important, but we also do have more normal opera, or it's new pieces. So you can also go to a theater and see an opera during our festival. Often it will be with a different theme or a different direction and things that you would see in the Royal Opera House. But I think they do what they do very good, and they have totally different opportunities in terms of resources. So I think it's important that this exists as well. So we don't only do one thing. There's many ways to engage with the opera festival, depending on who you are as an audience.
Alors ici devant vous, vous avez beaucoup de professionnels des musées qui sont venus assister au CITEM. Est-ce que d'une manière ou d'une autre, vous pourriez envisager de travailler avec des musées? Et si oui, comment? Et qu'est-ce que vos pratiques, vos projets pourraient apporter à un musée et vice-versa, évidemment?
I think essentially for me, museums are places of stories and are kind of joining points of culture. And when you go to see different exhibitions or different collections, you're connected with people in very different ways, often across the centuries or maybe across a big geographic area. And I guess for us, we do work with museums. We work with museums in terms of inspiration for visual artists to create contemporary works, or indeed in terms of performances. We've worked with composers to reimagine heritage music or traditional music. And I think what placing the work in the contemporary center of a city does is it all automatically brings those timelines together. So you're kind of crossing over between worlds in a way that is very, very direct, and quite often can illuminate different aspects of the work that is maybe not able to be presented in a non-regulated space in terms of humidity or restrictions of preserving ancient artifacts. To kind of take the inspiration from that and to place it in a very public arena makes people think in very different ways.
We have worked with museums on several occasions. Actually, we are at the moment in dialogue with Glyptoteket, a museum in Copenhagen, about having this project inside the museum. Obviously not with the truck, but still. Last year, the festival, we had a collaboration with a Belgium company who created a piece called Passage that was presented in Thorvaldsen's museum. It's an old building with a huge courtyard in the middle, and the project started with gathering everybody, and then the artists, the musicians and singers kind of diverted out into the museum, and the audience then had to follow them or choose which one to follow. And they, at the same time, they put new lights on the sculptures and the rooms, so the audiences would see the museum in a completely new way, and they would suddenly get lost somewhere, and the musicians were gone, and you were in this room, and they're like, oh my God, there's these paintings, I've never seen them before. And then I think there's not so many places left in most of our societies where people can just go for free. I mean, there's the parks and the libraries. I have a hope, and I'm sure some of your museums work the same way, but there's, depending on, of course, if there's an entrance price or not. But I think the museums has the potential to be this third public space that we share and meet each other. And yeah.
Dans les deux projets, il y a des artistes engagés. C'était le sujet de notre conférence l'année dernière, la conférence Art Explora. C'est comment les artistes qui s'engageaient dans l'art et la culture auprès des publics pouvaient eux-mêmes avoir un pouvoir de transformation. Ces artistes engagés qui conduisent les projets à vos côtés, qu'est-ce que ça change pour eux de s'engager dans ces projets-là, et qu'est-ce que ça leur apporte aussi en termes de démarche artistique? Et pourquoi c'est important pour eux finalement de travailler différemment que ne peuvent le faire d'autres artistes qui peut-être interagissent moins ou s'engagent moins auprès et pour des publics?
I think for me, when you talk about an artist, artists are they're like the magicians of the future. They can kind of imagine things and create things that haven't yet been thought of or invented, and make connections in different ways than maybe our civic society sort of regulations normally allow for. So when you're working with an artist in this kind of way to take their work outside, the artist is able to see connections that maybe are not obvious in terms of both the sort of heritage of a work or where society is going. I'm going to give you a very brief example. We created a project working with a composer where we were invited by a region of the UK called Kirklees to create a project that told the history of the region through music. No small pressure. The composer took the inspiration from the fields of the region, which were its origin. So he took back before anything. He went back to the fields and how the place would have been before society was developed there. And so the progress of that work became a piece of work that looked at from fields to rearing sheep, to the Industrial Revolution, to weaving cloth, to then migrant populations coming to weave that cloth. And he managed to navigate a path which really told the whole story in a very, very rich way through the music of the people that had been there in the past, and the people that are now inhabiting that area and making that place home. So I think the artists both change what is there, but also allow what is there to change their own creation. And when that happens, it's a really, really magical and subtle transformation. But I think it has opportunities to bring people together in ways that are impossible without that kind of framework that the artwork provides.
Finalement, c'est un peu réinventer la relation entre les artistes et le public. Donc c'est se rencontrer, créer un espace de dialogue et de rencontre, mais qui est différent d'un espace classique.
Yes, that's true. And one of our experiences is that the artist, and maybe it's because we work with opera, and normally it's a large distance between the stage and the audiences. So what we experience is a lot of the artists, they really like this. We also try to carefully choose the ones that are able to engage in this way. But we had an example on our festival stage. We had the Malmö Opera Orchestra coming over and performing with the choir as well. And there were like 2,000 people in the audience, outdoor in, nice summer evening. And the audience was so happy. And they were clapping and cheering and all during the evening. And the orchestra afterwards, they were so happy because they felt like rock stars. There was someone who put the lights on them, and the lights moved, and they could feel the engagement with the audiences, and they were like, "We want to come back next year." And so it also creates something for the artist.
Là, on a parlé de tout ce qui était fantastique avec ces projets de mobilité, on va dire, innovantes et nouvelles. Qu'est-ce qui rend ces projets difficiles à monter? Peut-être si vous pouviez en donner des conseils, quels sont les challenges, les défis à relever quand on organise et quand on monte ce genre de projet? J'imagine qu'il y en a un peu, pas tant que ça, mais qu'il y en a. Et comment vous les avez surmontés?
I think for me, it's all about making friends, because when you work in an institution or you work inside a building, there is an understanding that that's what this building is for. When you're taking work into the public realm, you're taking work into a place that people don't expect it. And you mean everybody who uses that space. So whether it's somebody who can't park their car where they normally do, or who's trying to get their mother to an optician's appointment and there's something different in the way, or whatever it happens to be, the market traders. You have to work right across society. Anybody who has access to the space in which you're working, either on a permanent or a temporary basis, you have to make them your friends. And for me, that's a really extraordinary privilege, because you're working with people in many, many different ways. But it's obviously quite a challenge as well. You can't, pretend that it's straightforward. I think the other thing that is really important to recognize is that it isn't the cheapest method of working. So if you're going to take work outside a building, I talked earlier about having to make the space right. So you're making your stage, you're making your gallery, you're creating those spaces. Yes, you are placing the work probably in front of many, many more people than would see it in a gallery or a museum space. But you're also having to invest in that experience, and that is quite often hard. You're having to raise money to do it. Very rarely are you charging a ticket because it's in a public space. So your economies and your planning is really, really stringent and difficult in the outset, but really, really rewarding as it comes off.
Agree. Now, one more thing I think is never underestimate the audiences. Just because it's someone who's out there and we're there already, you need to present really high quality. It might seem obvious, but at least with opera, if you experience one bad opera, you never come back. You might do if you see a bad movie. You might come back and try another one. But so you need to figure out why are we doing this and for whom, and then really mean it.
Si vous deviez donner un conseil, peut-être un seul conseil à un musée qui souhaiterait sortir de ses murs, organiser des actions hors les murs pour ses publics, qu'est-ce que vous donneriez comme conseil pour un projet hors les murs et mobile qui soit réussi? Quel serait le type, le conseil le plus utile pour quelqu'un qui travaille habituellement dans les murs de son musée? Allez, 2 conseils.
No, I think it's kind of the same as we just said. Yeah, think really hard about why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. And maybe team up with somebody who knows about working outside of the institution, because you get, you get used to thinking within whatever realm you have, even if between the building or inside. So I would team up if I were to do, when I am to do things inside a building, I team up with the ones who know about this building. And be good at making friends.
Making friends. Peut-être que vous avez des questions à poser au sujet de ces 2 projets et de cette manière aussi de proposer une programmation et des activités autour de la programmation pour renouveler la manière dont on peut s'adresser au public. Pas de questions de la salle? Ah, une question.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup pour toutes ces informations. Je voulais savoir si parfois il vous arrivait de solliciter les publics pour savoir de quoi ils pourraient avoir envie et de monter certains projets en les ayant concertés.
Oui et non. Oui, nous consultons le public, et parfois quand on fait des questions au public, les réponses qui arrivent sont pas autant grands que l'imagination des artistes. Et c'est ça une tension entre les deux, parce que quand on travaille avec des artistes, eux, ils ont une imagination hors de normale s'ils sont bons dans le travail. Et le public, parfois, ils veulent quelque chose de plus grand de quelque chose qui déjà existe ou qui existe déjà. Alors, il y a un moment où on prend les réponses du public et on invente sur les idées qu'ils ont données.
Yes, we also do talk to the audience. We normally do it afterwards, and what we ask is often more about the design and what makes them feel welcome and included. And that often sparks also ideas. But we have very few projects that comes directly from the audiences. It's more about the design around it.
I think one other thing is the legacy of a project. So when you're working in a space in a temporary way, quite often we're working where we don't have a base. So we're based in London, but our work takes us to many different cities. And the relationship that you develop with local organizations and organizations who know the public and the audience really well are really, really important, both before the project, during, and then critically to be able to continue the legacy of something that might be a very temporary intervention.
D'autres questions? Plein, super. Au moins 2 là.
Bonjour. Is there a way to assess the impact of this project? Oh, and have you done it? And
No. Well, there is the immediate impact that you can see when you go and interview the people. We are next year engaging in a large analysis on the audience with a new organization in Denmark about the Cultural Analysis Institute, I guess the directly translation, where they go out with their methods and try to measure what this means, the meeting between the audiences and the arts. I think it's difficult to really measure it on a longer term. Yeah.
Yes, we have, and yes, we do. We always carry out an independent evaluation of our projects, but the questions that you really want answers to are the hardest to get the data. So we do economic impact surveys, so looking at the impact of putting an event on in a city centre. Are there more people in the shops, cafes, bars? That's one thing you can measure. In terms of the people coming, are they people that would typically be going to a theatre? You can maybe get a sample of 1,000 people over an event that might have an audience of 150,000 people. So you're getting a very small percentage. Sometimes the simplest questions are the ones that you're going to get a response to. So, you know, might not tell you a lot, but did this make you happy? You know, actually, that's quite often the greatest one that people are going to want to respond to, and will give you, you know, a really good sense of the qualitative impact of an event. But it's very, very hard to get anything detailed.
Je crois qu'il y avait une autre question. Alors là.
Merci. Moi, je suis particulièrement touchée par cette idée de traverser, voire éliminer les frontières. Et je me demandais si vous aviez déjà considéré d'autres frontières pour des publics comme ceux qui sont en prison ou à l'hôpital.
Oui, je continue en français si je peux. Dans nos festivals et nos événements, s'il y a beaucoup de travail qu'on fait avec des artistes et le public avant le moment qui l'événement est public. Nous avons travaillé beaucoup avec des gens dans les prisons et aussi dans des maisons pour les retraités, les personnes plus âgées. Et c'est très intéressant au moment de mettre ce travail qu'ils ont fait devant un public qu'ils ne peuvent pas avoir une connaissance directe. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a ces deux groupes de gens qui s'intéressent dans la même chose par notre travail, mais qui ne vont jamais se connaître. Et ça, c'est quelque chose de très, avec beaucoup de pouvoir, mais c'est très difficile à évaluer entre les deux parce qu'ils sont séparés. C'est-à-dire que les gens dans les prisons, j'ai travaillé avec des artistes dans les prisons pour préparer des œuvres qui ont fait partie d'une grande festival de lumière, mais les gens dans les prisons ne peuvent jamais voir l'impact de ce travail sur le public. Alors, c'est quelque chose de très délicat de vraiment communiquer entre les deux parties de gens, le public qui peut voir le travail et aussi les gens qui ont fait le travail qui ne peuvent pas être dans le public central. Mais c'est c'est quelque chose très important à utiliser l'art qu'ils font pour faire ces connexions.
Yes, I mentioned before we have a huge festival stage outdoor, and I found it, having worked in all kinds of cultural genres, I think it's quite interesting to see that our festival stage that's in the middle of, I don't know what the comparison is to Paris, but it's a part of the city where people have the most varied backgrounds, socio-economic and cultural. And a lot of people live there. A lot of people cycle by on the way to work. There's a sports hall, so people come there to play basketball or tennis. There's a library. They go there to have books. So there's a lot of different people passing by this place. And when we set up and make it for free, we experience that people actually come with all kinds of background, even in opera, where you would normally expect a certain kind of audience to come. We see that people come with your kids, and when they get noisy, you can just go 10 meters away so you don't disturb the neighbors, and they can play there. People bring their dogs, people bring their friends, or they come alone. And I think it's very interesting, and one of these rare moments where the audience is actually very, very varied, because we tend to look like each other when we go out.
Une question là-bas.
Merci pour la présentation, c'est très touchant. Moi j'aimerais savoir un peu plus justement par rapport à cet impact vers le grand public, parce que souvent quand on parle de culture et des lieux, des institutions donc fermées, on parle toujours du même type de gens qui est déjà habitué et se sent à l'aise d'y aller. Donc on parle même par rapport à la gratuité, c'est pas toujours une vraie invitation aux gens. On parle d'un facteur économique, mais aussi social. Et le social, il touche, qu'il soit le transport qui peut coûter cher jusqu'au centre où il aura cette offre, ou le fait de se sentir part de ça. Je parle du côté, je suis brésilienne, et je vois une réelle difficulté de vraiment se sentir part de ça. On voit, il y a des institutions où aujourd'hui on est en train de travailler, où il y a vraiment tout type de services. Et quand même l'art la plus délicate qui a besoin d'être protégée, donc dans un cadre d'exposition artistique d'art visuel, et que soit vraiment le passage à quelqu'un qui va chez le docteur ou le dentiste, ou va amener les enfants au sport, c'est vrai que ça fait un passage plus naturel et ça invite. Donc qu'il soit des grands festivals ou même des petites actions, des interventions artistiques qui puissent aller presque se présenter au public, les forcer à passer et peut-être découvrir des intérêts qui ne seront peut-être, ils ne seraient jamais si ils n'étaient pas passés par là. Et après, au niveau, par exemple, dans des hôpitaux ou dans la population privée de liberté, par exemple, est-ce que vous avez déjà vous avez évoqué le fait de faire quelque chose sur place et amener en dehors? Est-ce que vous le présentez au moins au niveau visuel après un film ou quelque chose? Ou est-ce que vous avez déjà travaillé avec un festival ou quelque chose de ce type à l'interne? Donc pour qu'ils puissent eux-mêmes vivre l'expérience. Merci.
Just talking about the work in prisons. So I had an experience of working in a town in the north of England, which is called Durham, where we create a biennial light festival every 2 years. And Durham has 5 prisons in the town. It's a town of 45,000 people, but because of its location, which is quite isolated, it's historically been a place of a lot of incarceration. And we worked with 4 of the 5 prison populations on one piece of work, which was a wall which we created of perspex bricks. And we worked with artists with the residents of the prisons to create sculptures which talked about their hopes for the future. And I was privileged to be able to take this work that had been seen by around 200,000 people over 4 nights and to take the sections of the work that the people in the prisons had created back to the prisons to create a permanent series of exhibitions in their environments. And what was very interesting that came back from that, and this is where I said, perhaps not very eloquently in French, that the dialogue can become one way because you're taking work and then it's being seen by the public, but the public's response to it is hard to share back. We were able to show the films of the people who'd experienced the work, and also I think the testimonies from the people who'd been involved in that work, just recognizing that they had a voice, and that they had a voice which was heard and seen by so many people, became something that was really powerful then, I think, in terms of their future. Certainly for some of those individuals, we got testimonies back saying it was great that I was able to speak to so many people, or for once I wasn't just a number. And I think if you can, through art that is in the public realm, create that kind of dialogue, then there's an opportunity for more understanding.
Une question encore?
Merci beaucoup pour ces initiatives très très inspirantes et citoyennes qui créent du lien. On en a beaucoup besoin en ce moment dans le monde actuel. Donc merci pour ça. Moi j'avais une question un peu plus terre à terre, à savoir les financements. Je voulais savoir si vous bénéficiez de financements européens, notamment je pense voilà, bon, ou des partenaires peut-être locaux. Est-ce que les villes sont impliquées? Comment est-ce que vous trouvez des partenaires extérieurs? Est-ce que c'est un mixte? Donc voilà, ça m'intéressait un peu de savoir comment vous construisez ça. Merci beaucoup.
For us, we are primarily funded by private foundations, I think 75-80%. And I think maybe due to the fact that a lot of foundations still think opera is, worthy of money. And then we get some from the locals, the city government, and some from the state. And we are at the moment working really hard to try and make that grow, because some of the private foundations we supported you for so many years now, and now the board wants to look at the new guy in the classroom, right? So that's one challenge. And another way that we kind of enhance our finances is by collaborating, because we wouldn't be able to pay for all the things that we present. So there are local companies or ensembles that create a new opera, and they apply for money for that, and they come and say, if you give a tiny amount of it and help us present this. So it's a huge patchwork, yeah. But we haven't tried the European Union yet, so we haven't found the resources to apply.
Yeah, well, the European Union is out for us on the other side of the channel. It was great when we were part of you all. We are funded as an organisation through the Arts Council, so we have some direct government funding for our core costs, but that is a very, very small percentage of our operating costs. So for each project, we typically take about 18 months to 2 years to put a project together, and the majority of that time is needed for the fundraising to make the projects happen. So in terms of sources, I would say about a third from sponsorship, private companies, around a third from trusts and foundations, so different kinds of organizations, and sometimes embassies and sources to do with where an artist is coming from in terms of country specific, and then a third of statutory type funding from the local authorities, the town halls, the cities, and in some cases through universities.
Je pense qu'il va falloir qu'on conclue parce qu'on est un tout petit peu débordé. Merci beaucoup pour toutes ces questions et merci surtout à Kate et Rike pour leurs interventions. très inspirante, originale. On dit que la médiation avec les publics fonctionne quand elle mobilise plus de 3 sens. Là, je pense que c'est vraiment le cas dans vos 2 projets. Peut-être aussi un mot pour dire que Rike comme Kate font partie des organisations culturelles avec lesquelles on a plaisir à dialoguer régulièrement et qu'on a vraiment pour objectif de renforcer ce dialogue au niveau européen, notamment pour réfléchir à ces questions comme celle d'aujourd'hui, mais à d'autres. Comment démultiplier l'offre en zone rurale, comment engager les publics, comment trouver de nouvelles modalités pour parler aux jeunes publics et les engager et les impliquer dans les structures. Donc ça, c'est un dialogue qu'on souhaite conduire à un niveau européen en structurant des thématiques. Donc n'hésitez pas à recontacter la Fondation à ce sujet. Ça se fait notamment dans le cadre des journées Art Public qu'on organise en marge du prix Art Explora, qui est ouvert depuis cette semaine, depuis le CITEM. Vous pouvez candidater avec un projet que vous estimez innovant en direction des publics jusqu'au 9 juillet. Et toute l'équipe est là pour vous renseigner. Léa Nines, qui est juste là, à qui vous pouvez vous adresser, qui porte la publication du prix Art Explora, qui vous présente tous les beaux projets présélectionnés et sélectionnés l'année dernière, mais aussi des interviews inspirantes. Et Sophie Cabon, qui est juste là, et qui vous pourra spécifiquement vous parler de ce réseau européen que nous sommes en train de structurer. Merci beaucoup encore une fois d'avoir été avec nous, et à très bientôt.